Welcome to the CNalysis podcast. I'm your host, Chaz, the director of CNalysis. I want to thank Marshall Family Values for the intro y'all just got to listen to. They're from right here in Richmond. Thank y'all so much for the introduction. Today, I have Matt Colt Hall on, as well as Ben Tribbett. Matt Colt Hall is a Republican journalist at the Virginia Star. Ben Tribbett is a Democratic consultant. Ben, you're from Fairfax, and Matt, you are from Southwest Virginia, and I am from Richmond. So we got a great regionally diverse panel here. We're going to be going over the primaries coming up for the statewide contest for the Democrats, as well as the House of Delegates primaries. And I'm going to be squeezing out some predictions out of y'all, be ringing you out like a wet t-shirt. So no toss-ups or anything. I want to hear, if you had to pick, who you think is going to win and how likely. So first, I want to start with the big stuff, the statewide contest here. Ben, you are the Democrat, so you and I are going to talk a little bit about this. Let's go over governor. I think this is pretty much done for McAuliffe. I think the question that is more interesting is who comes in second. Which Jennifer? Which one do you think is going to come in second?
Well, I mean, I think from what I've seen, Chaz, like there's been a lot of late momentum to Lee Carter. And I'm not sure, I would say the race is really locked in for Terry McAuliffe anymore with all this momentum Lee Carter is getting at the end.
Really?
Ooh.
Probably not. I think Jennifer McClellan is going to end up being in second place. And I think the reason that she will get to second place is that she'll do well in the Richmond area. She has a good brand in the Richmond area, so she'll get some votes even outside of her own legislative district there. I'm not sure that Jennifer Carroll Foy, well, she's from a more populated area in Northern Virginia. I'm not sure that she has the region-wide brand and is really well known outside of her own district and even after this race. And so I think that Jennifer McClellan will be second place, but frankly, they're all going to be so small that it really isn't that important or relevant who's second or third. Terry McAuliffe is going to win in a landslide. He'll have more votes than I think all the other candidates combined. No one really put up much of a fight for him in this primary.
Do you think he's going to get a majority of the vote?
Yes.
I think when it comes to second, I want to say it's Carol Foy just because I think she's had the better run campaign. But that's my other thing. I absolutely understand the argument that, if Jennifer McClellan is doing well in the Richmond area and hitting enough in the other major metropolitan areas, I think that can put her in second. So it's hard, but I really want to say it's Carol Foy just because she's had the better run campaign. But I can absolutely get your argument that she may not have the statewide appeal to come in second. Let's move on to lieutenant governor. I think this race is leaning towards Sam Rasool. I don't think it's locked up for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that Sam took a lead early. And I think the only person who could really stop Sam at this point is Hala Ayala because she sort of took up all the establishment endorsements that used as a firewall to stop Sam. But she's been so underwhelming that might not be enough for her. And I agree with you, Chaz. I think Sam is the favorite. I think Hala had every opportunity to impress and under-impressed people. And I think she's going to struggle to find a coalition that's going to get her past Sam's enthusiastic supporters.
I think just word for word, you and I exactly agree on that. Well, let's talk about third or fourth. So I would say that, Hala is going to come in second. You would agree with that? Most likely.
I think she's the person who has the best pathway to stop Sam. She's run such a bad campaign. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, I don't know about the order of finish. Most likely, I guess, but I could easily see Andrea McClellan or Sean Perryman getting some late votes from the constituencies they're working that could potentially lift them up to second as well.
I would absolutely agree that the Ayala campaign has just been so underwhelming, and you can see how desperate they are by taking the $100,000 from Dominion. I mean, that's just not something Democrats really do anymore for the most part. especially from someone who ran in the 2017 class. That was a big thing. Um, I think it would be surprising if she didn't come in second. And it would show you just how little support from the establishment means. When it comes to third place, I think it's between Perryman and McClellan. I'm not sure who's going to come there, but I want to say it's McClellan given her home base support if it is as big enough as I think it will be to get her in third. I think there's a very small path for a Perryman and McClellan upset for the both of them, but it's extremely small. And, Ayala has a small path enough, but Perryman and McClellan are smaller.
When you get a Sean Perryman candidate who, has what you would call a demographic path to the nomination, because
Right.
he's from Northern Virginia, which is the most populated area of the state, and also he's African American. And between those two groups, you're talking about 2/3 to 3/4 of the primary electorate is one of those two groups.
I think young voters is another demographic he can play well with.
Absolutely. And so he has a lot of pathways, but because he's not been able to fundraise, he's not communicating with those pathways. I think that's his biggest problem. And so, like, for example, I live in Northern Virginia. I voted in every Democratic primary since I've been registered to vote, which is, longer than you've been alive, Chaz. And it's I'm not getting any direct mail from it. And so I assume what that means is that Sean has decided to go all in on trying to get the African American vote, which is mostly downstate. And I don't think that's the wrong strategy. It just means that if he's only talking to one of the universes that he could appeal into instead of all of them in terms of communications, that's just not going to give you the numbers you need to go win.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Where do you think Mark Levine plays in all this? I'm surprised that he's using this much of his money in this bid, especially while, and we can touch on this later, but I think he's probably going to lose his delegate primary. But where do you think he plays in the lieutenant governor race?
I think that Levine is a big nothing in the race. He spent this money late, but I don't think that he's getting much traction from spending the money late. And so, I don't think that Levine is going to be a factor. I'm not sure we'll get to his House district later, but he's never even received a third of the primary vote in any election he's been in his own district, let alone running statewide. And he's been basically invisible this whole race. So the idea that dropping in some TV ads in the last week is going to bail him out. He tried the same thing when he ran for Congress in the 8th district and got 6% of the vote. So I would be shocked if Mark Levine does much better than that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to Attorney General here, and then we can start on the House primaries. I think Mark Herring is a likely favorite to win re-election. I think Jay has run a formidable campaign, but not formidable enough to actually be the favorite in this race. I think there's still a pathway for Jay if he can really run the table in Hampton Roads and Richmond and do well enough in Northern Virginia, and then possibly, we'll see how he does in the rural areas. But I would still say that Herring is a heavy favorite at this point. What do you think?
I totally agree. And I also think that Jay's a good candidate. Jay's run a good campaign. This is a big, big uphill battle that he took on. Obviously, when he started running for AG, he didn't even think it was going to be a contested election. And now to suddenly go to running against an incumbent when he thought he might get the nomination unopposed, he took on quite a battle there. He's gone through this race. I think he's made himself, I think he could be very proud of the race he's run. I think of this race, Chaz, as, I don't know if you've ever remember the old NFL primetime that was on ESPN after every Sunday's games. And Chris Berman would say on NFL primetime, nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills every week. Well, nobody blows 30-point leads like Mark Herring. And every race that he's been in, he's had these wide leads in primaries, and then his general election in 2011 when he's a state senator. He's had massive leads and ended up winning by very narrow numbers. And so that just seems to be a characteristic where he likes to sit on leads and let the race tighten. And I think that in doing so, he's going to do Jay a big favor because it's going to inflate Jay's number in this primary and leave him much more viable to running again in the future.
Well, let's move on to the House primaries here. We're going to go in numerical order. First up is House District 2. Candy King is getting a primary from Pamela Montgomery. Candy King won. This is Jennifer Carroll Foy's old district that she resigned from. Candy King won a special election in early January. I will say I was wrong to write off Montgomery. I think I didn't know that there was going to be this much investment in her. She pulled in a lot of dough, and King doesn't really have a massive incumbency advantage here or anything. So there's no great name recognition for her. I think that this race is slightly leaning toward King. But what do you think, Ben?
It's hard to tell when this much money gets spent in a race, but I think that I like Candy King to win this one, and I'll tell you, this is my rationale as to why. While she's new, her husband had run in the seat twice before, once as the Democratic nominee in 2015, and then narrowly losing the primary, I think, by 10 votes to Jennifer Carroll Foy in 2017. So she knows people that are in the district. She knows her network, and there's a lot to be said for that. I think there's also for voters, it's very hard to beat someone who spent just a partial term like this, because while her name ID is lower, once they find out who she is, making a case as to why she immediately needs to be replaced is very hard. I think it's easier to replace an incumbent after a few years when they've done a poor job than it is to come in after a few months and say they've got to go already. I think there's a lot of voters that are going to just have a natural feeling that that's a little bit unfair, that she hasn't really had a chance to do anything yet. So unseating her is going to be unfair. So I think Candy will ride that. I think she'll ride her name ID from her husband having run and her activity in the community. And I don't think that Pamela has name ID across the district. She used to be the Woodbridge Democratic chair. I don't think that Pamela has a lot of ID in Stafford. And so I expect that Candy will do very well in Stafford, and that I would be surprised if Candy lost the Prince William precincts.
Okay. Now to House District 7. This is Nick Rush's seat. He is retiring. This is in Southwest Virginia, with Christiansburg and a little bit of Blacksburg, Pulaski and Floyd. You have Derrick Kitts, who ran for Congress in 2012. He's a union print shop owner, and he's running against Tara Orlando. Kitts got outraised in these campaign finance reports, but I want to say that because of Kitts' connections in Christiansburg, as well as his past name recognition, running for Congress is a great way to get your name recognition up. Though again, it was in 2012. I want to say he's a slight favorite. He's not a heavy favorite. I wouldn't be surprised if Orlando won. Obviously, women do well in Democratic primaries. But yeah, what do you think, Ben?
This is the kind of race, Chaz, where making a prediction, I think, I know you like me to nail that. You're going to try to nail me to the wall on all of them. But trying to predict between two candidates who, neither one of which has even raised $25,000, so they're not really communicating with voters, is like flipping a coin. If you're not communicating with voters, no one's going to know who you are outside of your grassroots campaign. People are coming out in this election to vote for governor, and they're going to have two names on the ballot. So I do think that having run for office before might be a benefit for Derrick Kitts, but the reality is that trying to pick between two people who are doing nothing is not going to be there's not going to be any science behind it.
All right, that's fair. All right, Matt. I know you've been sitting on your hands here. I'm ready to pull you in.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt. Mr. Tribbett out of respect. But I will say that 7th district race is kind of interesting. Kitts, has ran in the past, but it's been a while and it's kind of left to the past a little bit. So I still think Orlando has a shot at that. But let's all be real. It's like a R plus 500 seat. The stars would have to align in a way that I don't know how they could for the Democrat to even win that in the general. So that's just my 2 cents for what it's worth.
All right. Well, let's go on to House District 9 here, Matt. This is your favorite one. I have had people talk me up about this outside of just you on Ren Williams beating Charles Poindexter. I think this is going to be a close race. It's hard to say who wins. I'm sure you think Ren is going to win. And so if I'm right there, tell me why. And yeah.
So let's just put it in perspective. And this is fact. This is not me giving opinion. Ren has been in the mailbox since February. He's been on television since March. He's been on local networks since about April, May-ish. And, has been knocking at least 1,000 doors a week since March. That gives you, we've outraced Poindexter. Ren's outworked him. He's not, at some point you've got to think Ren's done everything right. Yes, there's incumbency. Yes, we understand that incumbency is important.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I looked the other day and Poindexter hasn't campaigned publicly in like the past 10 days, according to social media. He might be out there campaigning, but I don't see him on social media or anything. And the fact of the matter is he skipped a forum this week. Smith Mount Lake was having a forum amongst the two candidates. He skipped it. He's not getting out in public. He's not, Poindexter's not publicly campaigning. And so the question becomes who has more energy. Obviously, everyone in Virginia politics knows who I like. But the question is, it's a simple fact where Ren's knocked more doors. He's made more calls. He's, outworked, outraised. This smells like an upset if there ever was one. But the thing about it is that, and I'm just stating fact, Poindexter hasn't campaigned publicly. He's barely been in the mailbox and barely been on TV. When you're not communicating with voters, they don't know when to go to the polls for you. I mean, even if you are the incumbent, but if you don't communicate with them, they don't know to go to the polls.
I think he definitely got caught off guard here at the beginning. He raised a considerable amount between May and April, but that's a little bit too late. Like you said, Williams is out there in March. It'll be one that I think is definitely interesting. I think that's really only a race where you have a GOP incumbent at risk of losing their primary. House District 22 is another seat.
Chaz, can we, before we go on to that one?
Yeah, sure.
Jump in and say, the 9th district was one of the first and most competitive races that I covered when Not Larry Sabato first launched. And when Poindexter won that seat, I believe in 2005, there was a Republican incumbent there who barely won re-election against a Democrat, even though the area was solidly red at the time. And so he retired, and Poindexter was the open seat candidate in 2007, if I recall correctly. But and again, had a very competitive race. And I went down and covered that in person at the time. My family, is from Roanoke County on the Franklin County border. And so, know a lot of people who were in the district. And look, Charles Poindexter always underperformed because people hated him. And one of the things that, like, as a person, like, he just wasn't well liked in the community, and they were willing to vote for him as a Republican because they were Republicans. But no one had anything good to say about Charles Poindexter. And if you went to the district next door to the north and went into Roanoke County and, asked people at that time what they thought about, Greg Habib, they were all positive. If you asked them what they thought about, I can't remember who the other delegate from Roanoke County was at the time, but the other delegates were popular. Charles Poindexter, they just didn't like him. People didn't like him. And everywhere I went to cover it, they had something bad to say about him. I remember I went to Rocky Mount for a day to cover the race, and just person after person after person, including Virgil Good, had, like, side comments to say about Charles Poindexter. And so the idea that he could be vulnerable, I think it's not that he became vulnerable. I think he always has been vulnerable. I think he won because he was a Republican, and it's not a seat that anybody really challenged. And the fact that now he has a strong challenger, I think this might not be the wolf blowing over a house. The wolf might be blowing over a little straw tent.
Yeah, I mean, I think the race is tilting toward Williams. I think it's not going to be a a blowout for him, but I think he's going to narrowly beat Poindexter. But I may be wrong. Maybe Williams wins by more.
Ben, were you there during the 2011 race when Poindexter got drawn into Ward Armstrong's district, and it was like the biggest general election House of Delegates race Southside Virginia's ever seen? Were you were you there during that one?
I did come down and cover that, yeah, and it was and that was one that was so partisan because it was a party controlled type of race, and obviously with Governor McDonnell being very popular incumbent at the time, it gave Ward some headwinds, but even in that race, Ward overperformed even on the Franklin County side of the line, which was not his district. Obviously, that was Poindexter's old district, vis-a-vis what you would expect a Democrat to do. Because there's just a lot of people who just don't like Charles Poindexter. And of the ones that are left, they vote for him because he's a Republican.
Well, let's move on to House District 22 here. Kathy Byron is getting a primary challenge. I don't think she's really vulnerable whatsoever. I think this is in the bag for Byron. Matt, what do you think?
Kathy Byron and I don't agree on a lot of things. She is more conservative than I am as a Republican. But what I like about Kathy Byron is she hustles. She does not stop working all the time, every day. Out hustles everybody in the General Assembly, just outworks everyone. On top of that, she cashed her political chips in with Glenn Youngkin, and Youngkin's now the nominee. Youngkin, they can kind of help each other out. At the same time, it's not like her incumbent is the most favorite person in Bedford either. Her incumbent's kind of the town troublemaker. And I've said that before, and I'll say it again. He likes to cause trouble. That's what he likes to do. He likes to yell at the school superintendent, yell at the board of supervisors, and he will get some votes out of Bedford, but Kathy is just such a hard worker, and her team that she's got around her, her LA is incredible. She's got good folks on her race. Trevor Webb from the College Republican Federation of Virginia is on her race. Trevor is excellent, excellent guy. Dexter, her LA is excellent. Kathy, it would take a miracle of God himself for something to change in that race. Kathy just outworks everybody in the building. That's just what it is. She outworks everyone, period.
I think that's about right. I think this is pretty much a lock for her. And like you said, it's only the will of God that she has any real chance of losing. What about not too far away? You got House District 24. You got Ronnie Campbell. I think this is another situation where the GOP incumbent is pretty much safe.
I would agree, and I would agree for multiple reasons. One, Ronnie Campbell found out what he was supposed to do, and he did it on purpose, to quote Dolly Parton. He found out that in the General Assembly, he was supposed to be on militia, police, and public safety, and advocate for Virginia State Police. He's a former state trooper. He gets involved in his community. He has an excellent staff. His legislative aide, Charles Ferry, is really good at his job and a great guy. The thing is also, Charles won that district for Youngkin. Charles was working on Youngkin's campaign and won that district for the convention for Youngkin. That same area was heavily contested because you had a former unit chairman who was very big into Snyder, and Charles and the folks around Lexington still won that district for Youngkin in the convention. So, his aide already knows how to win the place for the statewide. The other guy has no money, and Ronnie Campbell does what he's supposed to. The whole reason of a primary is you've got to tell me the reason why to fire the guy. And this other guy hasn't had the money or the effort or the explanation on how to do it. So again, it's one of those, the heavens would have to part and there would have to be a miracle of God for something to happen. But I don't think they have anything to worry about. I really don't. I think the Campbell campaign is fine.
All right. House District 31, there's a Democratic primary here. This is Elizabeth Guzman's seat. Guzman ran for lieutenant governor and then dropped out in April, early April, after the campaign finance reports came out showing Sam Rasul with a lot of money. Guzman has three people running against her, but really I only see one candidate here with a path, and that's Rod Hall. But I still think that Guzman is a heavy favorite. I wouldn't say it's a lock for her. Ben, what do you think here on House District 31?
Yeah, Rod Hall is a great candidate, and it's a shame because he was supposed to be the Democratic nominee for House District 2 back in 2015, and he had some issues come up with his job where he had to withdraw from that campaign, which is how Josh King became the nominee very late in 2015 for the Democrats. Rod Hall's a great candidate, very well qualified, great fit for Southern Prince William County. It seems like he's just cursed. He had a race in 2015 where if he had stayed in the race, he would have won. He would have been a delegate. He's since moved, now lives in the 31st district, was the heavy favorite in this one. Now Elizabeth Guzman's come back. And Chaz, I'm going to predict that Guzman's going to win this primary. She's the incumbent. It's her district. I'm not sure that Rod has given people enough of a reason to fire the incumbent since she's not running for both offices anymore. I think he needed to give them that reason to fire her. But I think Rod Hall's the better candidate. I just think Guzman's likely to win it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think she's very likely to win. I think Hall has a very small path to victory, but I think it exists. Let's go up to McLean, up in Fairfax, House District 34. You got Kathleen Murphy. It's getting a primary from her left. Ben, I know you would disagree on that notion, but she's getting a primary from her left in my book from Jennifer O'Delly. I think O'Delly hasn't really run a strong campaign, and she was already in an uphill battle trying to flip this type of district, which is very, I would say, center-left, very friendly towards establishment Democrats, not really the type of area that you would think there would be an appetite for a challenger from the left. Ben, what do you think about this race? Who do you think wins?
Murphy wins in a landslide. Adeli's campaign's fallen completely flat. This is such a goofy challenge. Murphy, I think, probably was willing to step aside and let Adeli run for her seat in the future when she was ready to retire. Adeli sensed opportunity, got in, tried to force Murphy out. And it's a classic poker move, Chaz. You don't raise a hand if you're not ready to call it. And Adeli went all in, and Murphy called the bluff. And now Adeli's political future, I think, is in shatters from having done this primary challenge and forced Kathleen through it. I think Kathleen is going to blow her out. Maybe Adeli will win a precinct or two, maybe. But I think that Murphy will win going away, and that Adeli's going to have a very tough sales job to go in 2 years or in 1 year when Murphy does retire to get people to nominate her after having pulled this stunt.
All right. You got House District 36 next. This is another Democratic primary. Ken Plum is going to primary for Mary Barthelson. Plum has been in the chamber longer than anyone else has currently. He's been in there since the 1970s. So he's got a big incumbency advantage. I don't see this as competitive in any sense of the word. I think Ken Plum, you can bet the farm on him winning the primary. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I agree completely, Chaz.
All right. Kay Corey's next. This one's a little bit interesting. I really don't think this isn't a primary from the left or right. They're about the same on the issues. I think Holly Hazard, who is primarying Corey, hasn't really given a reason to fire the incumbent. I think that Corey is likely to hold on. Hazard did pull in a considerable amount of money in this last finance report, but nothing that would indicate that she has a campaign that can beat Corey. What do you think, Ben?
Well, Chaz, on this one, I better disclose to start out with that the firm I work with, Pocket Aces Consulting, has been doing a number of things to support Delegate Corey. So I want to just disclose that up front. Having said that, we will win. And this, again, was a challenge that didn't need to happen, but did. And I think is going to leave Holly politically damaged for quite some time in the future for having, again, forced a primary that didn't need to happen.
All right. Now, 45 is interesting. This is Mark Levine's seat. He's double filing while running for lieutenant governor. He's also running for his delegate seat. Ben, we talked a little about this earlier when we were talking about his LG bid. 2015, he won in a very divided field, I think with less than 30% of the vote, if I recall correctly. So he didn't get a huge percentage of the vote in his 2015 primary and hasn't faced a primary since. He's getting challenged by Elizabeth Bennett Parker. I would say Bennett Parker is running slightly to Levine's left. She's a vice mayor of Alexandria. I think that Bennett Parker is honestly a heavy favorite in this. I would be surprised if Mark Levine won his primary. He doesn't really have a lot of support in his own district. I am very impressed by the campaign that Bennett Parker has built for herself. If you were to drive around Alexandria, you would see all of her signs and you wouldn't really see much for Mark Levine. What do you think on this one, Ben?
You know, Chaz, Alexandria has some weird mayoral politics that have overlapped with both of these Mark Levine House primaries. In 2015, he was aligned with outsider candidate for mayor, Allison Silverberg, who was elected in that primary because it was a three-way contest and the establishment vote was more split. And so Levine came in with her. Silverberg lost her seat in 2018. Alexandria goes every 3 years, so they're always on different cycles. And now they're back up in 2021, and Silverberg, as the former mayor, is back challenging Justin Wilson, who unseated her 3 years ago. I don't think that Levine has much of a constituency on his own, and I think you absolutely is going to underperform. And I'm not sure that Bennett Parker has the depth of support that you would normally need to beat an incumbent. But I think Mark Levine is so weak that I think she probably will take it with by default, because I think a lot of those voters that don't know her well enough yet don't like Levine. And so I think that she is the narrow favorite. If you're gonna force me to make a pick today, I'm gonna say she wins. You know, Levine is just incredibly weak for an incumbent.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree.
I would
Go ahead, Matt.
I apologize. I know that I'm not the expert on Northern Virginia or Northern Virginia Democrats. I'm farthest from it. But from what I see, I can't figure out how Levine, just to be honest, I just don't see the math for him. Not only in the lieutenant governor's race, but absolutely not in this delegate's race. I just don't see the math. It's not there. And Lord knows I'm not the expert on Northern Virginia Democrats. I am clueless, but the truth of the matter is, just looking at this race and looking at, you know, the money and everything, money and efforts online and things like that, I really don't see it for Levine. I really don't.
I think this is kind of like the Democratic version of House District 9, except I would say Levine is a far weaker incumbent than Poindexter, in my opinion. So I think they're mirror opposites, where you got a Republican primary in Southwest Virginia with a relatively weak incumbent, and then you have a pretty weak incumbent up in Northern Virginia in a Democratic primary. Another one that is next door where you have a Democratic primary is in House District 49. Alfonso Lopez is getting a primary from his left definitively from Karishma Mehta. I think Lopez at this point is a heavy favorite. I don't think Mehta has really built the campaign that she needed to really have a shot, or a great shot, at beating Lopez. I think given this district's makeup, there could be room for an upset, but I just think it's really unlikely that Lopez loses his race. I think Mehta will beat JD Spain's margin. I think JD Spain didn't even get a quarter of the vote in when he tried primarying Lopez in 2019. But Ben, what do you think?
Chaz, I think Lopez is the favorite. I'm impressed with Maida. I mean, she's raised over $100,000 as a first-time candidate. That's really impressive when you're not getting support from any of these groups that are coming in, dropping big bucks. She's done it on her own, But I have to say, I think Lopez is the favorite because people have voted for him before. It's a governor's election, and I don't know, Chaz, if you saw the feel-good story that he had this week when he had an event with Terry McAuliffe and Eileen Fillercorn at a local pie shop in his district. Did you see that one?
I did. I saw your tweet about it.
I thought it was such a feel-good story because that pie shop, there's no way it would have survived a pandemic if it wasn't for Alfonso Lopez. Mm-hmm. And he came in there and, I know most of the businesses that got saved around the state, probably came in through legislation. Alfonso did this one by himself, Chaz. He went in, he ate so much pie this year during that pandemic that he was single-handedly able to save this pie shop. And I think that's why he brought everyone there to do the campaign. And I think what a good feel-good story to end this primary on.
All right. Well, House District 50, we're going to do one more and then we're going to take a break here. House District 50, this is Lee Carter's seat. Lee Carter is, I would say, the most leftward member of the General Assembly. He's running for governor. I think he's going to get last place in that bid, but he's double filing for his seat. He got a pretty strong primary challenge in 2019, but honestly, I don't think the Maldonado campaign, Michelle Maldonado is one of two candidates running against Carter. The other is Helen Zarita, and Zarita is going to come in last place here. But Maldonado, I don't think she's really run as strong a campaign as Carter's 2019 challenge. Ben, how likely do you think Carter is favored? I think he's pretty. I think he's pretty heavily favored. And what would you make of the Maldonado campaign?
Yeah, gosh, this one's to me is a toss-up.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's so weak in the gubernatorial race, and he's run such a pathetic campaign there that convincing his voters at home to stick with him, Chaz, I'm not sure he's going to get 20% of the vote for governor in his own district. Imagine that being a legislator and you run for governor and you don't get a fifth of the vote in your own legislative district. I could be wrong about this. Maybe Carter is much, much stronger than what I'm thinking, but I think he's going to get blown out in his own district in this gubernatorial race. He might be third place in his own district. And I think that leaves him very, very vulnerable down ballot. I'm not sure that this challenge is stronger than the challenge in 2019. I just think Lee Carter might have made himself that much weaker.
That's fair. All right. Well, we're going to take go ahead, Matt.
I apologize. I would love nothing more than for Lee Carter to lose his primary. I'm not a Lee fan. As John Frederick says, Commie Lee in the CCP. Lee is just he's miserable. Just a miserable. I don't like him. God, I hope so. I hate to admit it. But if anybody could lose both their delegate race and their statewide race, please let it be Lee Carter. Please. I'm sorry I said it. Just there it is. Now we can go to break. I apologize.
I'm sure every Republican in Virginia would be happy if Lee Carter lost his primary, but I think Lee's going to win it. I think there's room for an upset by Maldonado. But I think the big thing here is that while Zarita really has no campaign at all, I think when you have a quote anti-Lee vote, it's getting split. But yeah, we're going to go to break real quick and we'll come back and talk through the districts that are 51 through 99. Stay with us. And welcome back. We are going to finish the rest of these House primaries here. We're still going numerical order. The next one, Matt, this is yours. This is a GOP primary, House District 51. Ben, I do want your opinion since this is Northern Virginia, but I'm going to let Matt start here. House District 51, this is Hala Ayala's seat. Ayala is not double filing. She's got a strong candidate replacing her. The Republicans have two candidates, Jeff Dove, who is a perennial candidate, and Tim Cox. Dove outraised Cox. I think this is a tough race to pick. But Matt, who do you think is going to win this between the two of them?
This is truly I'm going to be honest. Northern Virginia is not my strong suit. I was raised in the hills of Southwest Virginia. I honestly don't know. There's not been enough talk about it one way or another to tell you which way. I know you're mad at me because I say that, but I there's just not enough. Like, there's not enough energy or momentum about this race. Like, nobody's talking about it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Ben, I will defer to you, even though I'm the more conservative Republican commentator here. I will defer to you to see if you have an opinion.
Yeah, I'm curious, Chaz. I'm not remembering Jeff Dove being a perennial candidate. I know he ran for Congress a couple years ago, but has he been on the ballot besides the congressional race?
He's ran for Congress twice, and now he's run for delegate. So he ran one time in Connolly's district and one time in another district. He's running two different districts in Northern Virginia.
He's carpetbagged before in other races. So yeah, this is his third run for office after two unsuccessful ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I mean, I think that Dove is I've met him a couple of times when he's campaigned for Congress, and seems like a perfectly nice guy. I think he got some decent support when he ran for Congress for a Republican. I think he was the nominee once, wasn't he, Chaz? Didn't he?
If I recall correctly, he was the nominee. I want to say it was last year, if I recall correctly. It may have been 2018. No. Sorry, it was 2018. He was the nominee against either Beyer or Connolly. I can't quite remember.
Against Connolly, yeah.
I think so.
So I mean, I think being a congressional nominee, you're going to have some name ID. You're going to have a list. I think that's why he's probably raising a little bit more money. And so I would say, I don't see how someone like Tim Cox is going to beat him. I think the onus is on Tim Cox to raise money and get known to beat Jeff Dove. So I would pick Jeff to win that one.
That's what I was thinking, kind of tilt. I think he would be a slight favorite, but it's going to be close. Precisely for that reason, because of money and name ID. Well, House District 66 is the next one. This is a Democratic primary here in the Richmond, Virginia area. This is Kirk Cox's seat. Kirk Cox is not seeking re-election. This is a pretty competitive district. I would say that the Republicans are slightly favored to hold it because, honestly, their candidates aren't great here. You have Katie Sponsler, Leonard Harris is the other candidate. I think Sponsler is a heavy favorite because I think she's honestly the only serious candidate in this race, and she's run the only mildly serious campaign. I think there's issues for the Democrats in the general election here, despite the district being pretty blue. The Republicans have a pretty good candidate. But Ben, who do you think wins the primary here between Sponsler and Harris?
Sponsler in a landslide.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. She's running this district. Well, she ran in a similar district before. So I think with that name ID and honestly that she's just, only been the only one to run a campaign, I think she'll win it. Next one is another Richmond seat. This one's more interesting, though. This is House District 68. We have two primaries here. We're going to go to the Democratic one here first, since this is a Democratic-controlled district. Delegate Dawn Adams is getting a primary from Kyle Elliott. Elliott has the support of the LeVar Stoney crowd. I think Adams is the favorite here. I think there's room for an Elliott upset, but I would bet on Adams here, given the type of district it is. I think it suits Adams more. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, Chaz, this is a tough one because I think Kyle Elliott's a good candidate. Dawn Adams has some serious flaws around her, but beating an incumbent without a single issue to sort of take her down with, I think is going to be too tough for Kyle to overcome. But I think he's a good candidate and would not be surprised to see him be very successful in running for something in the future.
All right. And then the GOP one, this one's fun.
Fun. Yes, fun.
It is fun to watch. Just because Mike Dickinson, who is definitely by definition a perennial candidate, former Democrat turned Republican, he is the definition of, I think the word you used the first time we talked about this race, Matt, was nasty. He is running in the GOP primary against Mark Early Jr. I think Jr. is heavily favored to win this. I think there's very little room for a Dickinson upset. If Dickinson does become the nominee, though, this race is a lock for the Democrats. It was not really that competitive before. It's in likely territory right now, but it is absolutely a Democratic hold if Dickinson becomes a nominee. Matt, who do you think wins it?
Well, I'm just going to be honest. Dickinson is just no. This is the man who had a MAGA strip club party at the strip club he owns. That's a fact, people. That's not me commentating on this. That's not me telling my opinion. That is a legitimate, verified news story that he had. And apparently, I just Googled this. He had like Roger Stone and a bunch of these, like, he had like apparently a Trump themed party at his strip club. And I can't wrap my head around why would anyone, I don't know. Mark Early, I don't know Mark, but Mark, is the son of the former attorney general. He's got the right resume. First of all, Early has the right resume, comes from a political family, involved in the local community. Mike Dickinson is just like, well, I'm just going to have a strip club and I'm going to, have a MAGA themed strip club party with Roger Stone. And I'm then going to get myself elected to the House of Delegates, which I never thought those words would come out of my mouth, to be honest. But I
think Early fits more with the type of Republican voter in this district. You've got
absolutely
areas like Windsor Farms, which is old money, rich white Republican types. And there's a lot of those type of Republicans throughout the district, very moderate and Republicans. So I think Early is very heavily favored here.
I would definitely agree. I would have loved to have seen my dear friend Garrison Coward win this one last cycle. Garrison is just amazing as a human being and as a political mind, but now he's sitting very pretty working for Mr. Youngkin. So I think like that old Garth Brooks song says, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers, but I really think Early is in a good spot.
Mark Early Jr. might be my least favorite candidate of the year because, one, it makes me feel old that Mark Early Jr. is old enough to run for delegate. But two, he's balding. He's so old, he's already balding. So you want to really make me feel old is I remember the campaigns against his dad, and now his son is running for office, and his son looks like an old man. So I want to just say, like, he's making me feel old, and Mark Early Jr., I hope he's listening, that your campaign has deeply offended me.
He is offended. He is offended. Let him be offended. Shame. Shame.
All right. Well, let's go next door. In another Richmond seat, we're still in Richmond here. Jeff Bourne is getting a primary, but I think Jeff Bourne is going to be fine. This is a Democratic primary. Bourne is a pretty solid incumbent. Ben, what do you think?
I think that Jeff Bourne will win in a landslide that might be the biggest in the state.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, let me skip over numerical here then, because another one adjacent to 71 is 74. Delegate.
There might be some. I know that's his competition for the biggest landslide.
Yeah, I don't know which one of them between Bagby and Bourne is going to have the bigger win, but yeah, I think both of them are going to easily win with a whole lot of the vote. Well, let's go back here in numerical order. The 72, Matt. I know you don't know a lot about this race. This is House District 72 is in Henrico, Schuyler Van Valkenburg's district. Somewhat competitive district, not that much. The Republican campaigns haven't really done much here. I think Holmes is the favorite. They're both on conservative radio, but I mean, last I checked, I think Holmes is the only one that you can really do a Google search on and he actually pops up. So I want to
I
say
hate
it's him, but go ahead.
I hate to claim ignorance, but like I talk to my friends in Richmond and they don't even have a clue about this one.
Yeah.
Like I have wonderful friends in the Richmond Republican community who I've known for years and we're friends. And like, my goodness, I can call up these people, with 30 minutes notice and say, I need a couch to sleep on for the weekend. Are we good? And these are folks that have been in the party for 20 years and they don't even have a clue on this race. So my thing is that, I Van Valkenburg is a vulnerable seat. That's a seat the Republicans can win. And then we've got these two candidates that nobody really knows anything about. It is a frustrating, from my perspective, thing that we don't know anything about these two candidates. Just to be honest.
I think Van Valkenburg may have been starting out a little bit more vulnerable, but at this point, given that both of these candidates were coming in last minute and they really don't have the campaigns, we moved this race actually just to likely Democrat recently from lean Democrat. I think Schuyler Van Valkenburg is going to be fine. It doesn't really look like the Republicans are targeting him this time around, which if you told someone that 4 years ago, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Because 72nd was, one of the most watched races. It was expected to be one of the closest races for the House of Delegates in 2017. Then it got redrawn a little bit, became a little bit more Democratic. And now Schuyler, I think, is heavily favored for re-election. Not a shoo-in, but I think he's heavily favored. 79 is the next one. This is a very interesting one. I am having a trouble picking a winner here. This is in Portsmouth, Chesapeake, and Norfolk. Ben, this is Steve Heretic versus Nadarius Clark and Dante Walston. Nadarius Clark got a lot of money, raised over $500,000 between April 1st and May 27th. He beat Heretic to the punch on getting on TV. And you pointed this out in in the last time we talked about this, Ben. Heretic is representing all this new territory in a district that, because his district was redrawn in 2019, this district is also it has a higher African American population, slightly more than his previous district. Heretic usually bucks his party from the right. I think there is a pretty good chance, a very good chance, that Heretic loses his primary here. I think the only thing that is very beneficial to him is the presence of Dante Walston. Not like Walston has ran an amazing campaign, but you're talking about possibly splitting the anti-Heretic vote. So I'm having trouble picking a winner here. Ben, what do you think?
Well, Chaz, this is another one where I got to first open up with a disclosure that our firm has been working with Nadarius Clark since early on in his campaign, long before some of the support came in for him. And so it's been one of those things really fun to watch somebody, run a grassroots campaign and bring together the support behind it that he may not have even been able to envision himself at the start of his own campaign. So it's been pretty cool. So I'm going to pick Nadarius and say I think he's going to have an upset. I agree with you. I think having two challengers makes it a little bit more difficult. I think the determining factor here is not Heretic's voting record. I think the determining factor is the investigation that he is under for and there's currently a legal case that's a civil case around racketeering and fraud of consumers from other states that were involved in some complex legal proceedings that he took to Portsmouth court and acted, according to this lawsuit, extremely inappropriately in. And I think that is the thing that you see that the TV ads are talking about now. It's the thing that was talked about in the direct mail. And I think that that is going to be the Achilles heel for him here. It's not just the voting record. It's also his own personal behavior may take him down.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Clark won. This is the type of pick where I think it's going to be a very close race, and it's hard to pick where I'm fighting with, where my head is fighting against my gut. My gut says that Clark wins. My head says that Heretic wins. So I'll have to really think on this throughout the next few days as I pick final picks. The next one is 83. Matt, this is yours. This is Chris Stolle versus Tim Anderson versus Phil Kurzmiziak. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I think Stolle is a moderate favorite here. I would say this race leans toward him. I think that if Stolle loses his primary somehow, I think that is very good for Nancy Guy because, Stolle has great name recognition. And I think it would be a situation where I've said this before. Chris Stolle first ran for the House delegates in 2007 and narrowly lost, while Bush was an unpopular president. Then he won landslide in 2009. I don't think he would win in a landslide this year, but I think this is a situation where he lost narrowly in a real, competitive Virginia Beach seat because of a unpopular Republican president. And now that president is gone. I think Stolle would be the favorite going to the general election, very slightly. But what do you think of the GOP primary here? Do you think Stolle is a favorite? And if so, by how much?
So I believe it was The Wire. I just got HBO Max, so I'm watching all the HBO shows. The Wire had a statement saying, if you came for the king, you better not miss. And the thing about it is, I say it's a very slight tilt to Stolle because Anderson, the thing about Anderson is he's got name ID across Virginia. People know Tim Anderson. He's a known quality. People know who Tim Anderson is. The thing about it is he's running against a Stolle, which there's a couple families in Virginia politics that you don't ever cross. Those being the Kilgores, the Stolles, the Obenshanes, those kind of folks. You just don't cross them. I mean, it's not good for your political career to cross one of those. So what I'm going to say is, Stolle tilt Stolle, but I'm going to say this, Tim Anderson is very engaging. He knows what he's doing. He's a heck of a guy. I really like Anderson as a person, but like I said, you better not miss when you come for the king, and Stolles are kings. I mean, that's all there is to it. They run the place like crazy. The other factor is that Kurzmiziak is running a strong grassroots operation. I wonder how many of those votes he peels off from the anti-Stolle crowd, and the question being, because Kurzmiziak's running a grassroots race and he peels off enough votes, that therefore would help Stolle in the end because his anti-Stolle vote would be split. But one thing, Chaz, we need to cover House District 82, which was an additional primary that came about due to the nomination of Attorney General candidate Jason.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Well, that's a firehouse primary, correct?
Yes, it is a firehouse primary. I actually wrote an article about this. This is bonkers, people. This is absolutely bonkers. So this is Ann Farrell Tata. If you're a student of Virginia politics, her father-in-law, Bob Tata, was the delegate forever and ever and ever, amen, in Virginia Beach. He was the delegate forever. And so she's got that family name behind her. Kathy Owens is an appointee of the governor on the Virginia Veterans Memorial Board. She's a Navy pilot. It's very interesting. The two candidates, kind of have similar views. They have different backgrounds. But the crazy part about this is, and I wrote about this at the Star last week, this is a race where the firehouse primary is being held at Tata's church the week after Memorial Day, the week after Governor Northam has lifted all coronavirus restrictions on Virginia Beach Boulevard on a Saturday during the day, which it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that it's going to be really hard to get down Virginia Beach Boulevard on a Saturday in a tourist season right after Ralph Northam lifted all coronavirus restrictions. So I don't know what's going to happen in this one because you can't tell how people are going to vote. Now, Tata is going to have an advantage because it's her church. I mean, that's where, like, she's on planning commissions at that church, and she's in that church. And her father-in-law was the delegate for 20 years. She's got an advantage. But the fact of the matter is, you're putting a firehouse primary on Virginia Beach Boulevard in the middle of tour season.
Right.
Who knows who's going to show up to the thing?
When is the firehouse primary?
It is actually on Saturday. It is being held Saturday from 10 to 3 at Galilee Church, which if any, I know you guys have all been to Virginia Beach. If you know where the Cavalier Hotel is, the very famous old Cavalier Hotel, if you literally walk out the front door of the Cavalier, take a right, and it's 1.2 miles down the street, is Galilee Church. It's literally 1.2 miles straight shot from the Virginia Cavalier. So it's on the ocean front on a tourist weekend in a tourist area. It makes no sense. And that's not me commentating. That is legitimately a fact as to where that race is being held.
All right. Well, we're still in Virginia Beach here in a seat not too far away. Let's talk about the 84th. This is Glenn Davis's seat. This is a competitive seat. You have a Democratic primary here. Tracy LaGuide, honestly, has run a better campaign than I thought she was going to build for herself. She's running against Kil Melnick, who's on the school board. I think this is an issue. I'm having another issue picking a winner here. On the one hand, LaGuide fits the demographics of the district for a Democratic primary better, but Melnick has name recognition. I think they're about even in campaign strength, though. So it's really an issue of that. Another issue that LaGuide has pinned Melnick on is her previously giving money to Republican candidates, saying that she's a dino, Democrat in name only. Ben, what's your read on this primary?
Yeah, this is a tough one, Chaz. I'm going to say in a coin flip, I'm going to go with Kim Melnick to win the race because she got late support from Sonia Smith, which gave her a money advantage over Tracy. It was not a humongous advantage, but that's also all we've seen on the reports to date. Usually you can see the candidates, when Sonia gets involved to back a candidate, historically speaking at least, she doesn't stop until the candidate has the best chance they have to win. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some more money come in there at the end. And I think that makes Melnick, if she's going to communicate a little bit more, a narrow favorite.
All right. Well, let's go up to Northern Virginia in House District 86. Delegate Ibrahim Samira is getting a primary from Irene Shin. I think Samira is vulnerable here. I think he's definitely vulnerable, but I think he's favored. I would be somewhat surprised if Shin won. She has pulled in a lot of money. I think if I recall correctly, she did outraise Samira in this last finance report. But I think with the amount of endorsements Samira has gotten, he's edged out Shin there. I think he's going to win. But again, it's definitely a competitive primary, I would say. Ben, what do you think?
Very competitive primary. And, I think that, look, Ibrahim's not a candidate that he could have held his seat much easier. All of these things are self-inflicted, that his problems. Now, Irene has not been as strong of a challenger as she could have been as well. I mean, I think, she's extremely political and comes from a political background and I think has had a lot of trouble connecting with voters in her district.
I think she also hasn't really given a great reason to fire Samira, if I can be quite frank.
Yeah, I think, it's so, Chaz, it's all of it fits into one bucket, which is Irene is mechanical and doesn't understand the feeling side of politics. And I think this happens to a lot of operatives when they think that they're the ones that are coming in, making difference in an election and determining the outcomes. And operatives can make a difference in a close election. but candidates make the difference in elections, and connection with voters makes a difference in an election. And so, she could win because Ibrahim is that weak, but she hasn't put it away, even though she could have. The campaign's very unimpressive. Frankly, so is Ibrahim's. And this one really is going to come down to which one of them, is going to, have a larger base of support. And I think that they'll split the town of Herndon. I wouldn't be surprised if Irene won that by a little bit. But I think that Irene's going to struggle when she gets outside the town of Herndon. So if I was going to bet on this one, I think that it's going to be Ibrahim by a nose.
All right, well, let's go on to House District 89. Delegate Jay Jones is getting a primary from Hannah Kinder. I still don't know how to pronounce her name. Last name, I think Jay is pretty much a shoo-in here. He's double filing again. He's running for Attorney General, but he's also double filing for his delegate seat. Ben, what do you think here?
Yeah, I think a lot of the candidates who are running for two at once are struggling. Jay Jones hasn't had that problem because he's very popular in his own district. And I don't think voters will have any issue there voting for Jay twice.
I think so as well. All right, the last one here, House District 99. This is Northern Neck. You got a three-way primary here. I think that Linwood Blizzard is the favorite here. He has got the most money here. This is a district where the Democratic primary is pretty heavily African American, which works in his favor. I think he's a moderate favorite. I think that given it's a split field and there hasn't been a lot of money, there's possibly room for another candidate. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, Chaz, I agree. I would also just say that, the candidate that impressed me the most in the race is Jaleesa Ward. She got in late. And I think anyone that comes in right at the end of an election and has almost no campaign. I always like these late entries that don't have a campaign. A lot of times the late entries come in early, and they I'm sorry, not the late entries, but the no campaign entries come in early and they just never do anything. I always wonder what motivates somebody to come get into a campaign like this right at the last minute to then do nothing. I think she's had 3 contributions listed on her report, one of which is her. So, I say that sarcastically of being impressed, but it's always so weird how these how people think and what they think goes into this, and how do they end up on the ballot.
All right, folks. Well, that handles that. The predictions from both Ben Tribbett and Matt Colt Hall on the upcoming primaries for the Virginia House of Delegates and the statewide primaries. A little bit from myself as well. Final prediction.
Chaz, do we get to burst in here and get to hear more about your poll?
Oh, yeah. Well, the poll should be out by next Saturday. I think that's what we're looking at. For those who don't know, there has not been any general election polling conducted for the Virginia 2021 election. So we thankfully got money from a lot of people. And I want to thank everybody so much who contributed. We're working with JMC Analytics. I think we're on track to get in the field on Wednesday and wrap up by Thursday in calling, and then Friday just kind of work on summarizing, and then publicly release on Saturday. So next week, I think that's what we're looking at. I will let people know if the exact date and time. Haven't picked the exact time, but I think we're at the earliest looking at next Saturday, the week of the primary, after we find out who wins the Democratic primaries. Obviously, I think we should know who the winners of these statewide primaries are on election night, to be quite frank. I would be surprised if there are any razor thin margins that required waiting on some of the later votes that come in. But yeah, thank you for reminding me, Ben.
Well, yeah, and a great job putting that together, Chaz.
Yeah, I'm very
excellent.
I'm very excited
job,
for it.
Chaz.
Thank you. I'm very excited for it. I'm glad that we finally get to see a poll, getting a snapshot of what the general election looks like. It'll not just have governor, but also the races for lieutenant governor and attorney general as well as the House generic ballot for the House of Delegates contest, as well as a few other questions. But yeah, Ben Tribbett and Matt Colt Hall, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad I got to ring out some predictions from you. Here's to a very contentious primary season. It's been very interesting to watch. For those who are waiting on final predictions from us on the House of Delegates primaries, you've gotten a little glimpse of them here, but for some races like 79 and 84, you'll figure that out. On Sunday, we'll be posting our final House of Delegates predictions. Thank y'all so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Guys.
All right. Thank y'all.